The astrologer who prescribed fear instead of medicine. An old Iranian story. Okay, well then. They say in the old Persian stories that many centuries ago there lived a king who suffered terribly from obesity. Now, when I say obesity, I don't mean a few extra pounds. I mean the poor man could barely move around anymore. Every morning he needed servants to help him get out of bed. Every night he woke up gasping for air. Sitting on his throne was difficult. Climbing stairs was difficult. Bathing was difficult. Getting dressed was difficult. Even eating has become difficult. And yet, strangely enough, the king continued growing heavier with every passing month. The royal physicians tried everything they could think of. Indian herbs, bitter Egyptian medicines, fasting, steam baths, but nothing worked. Not only did the king fail to lose weight, he became larger and larger. And if you're wondering whether threatening your doctors is a good medical strategy, well, apparently the king thought it was. Finally, the king lost his patience. "If none of you can cure me within a week," he shouted at the physicians and scholars of the palace, "I will have every one of your heads removed from your shoulders." Now, as you can imagine, this announcement caused quite a bit of panic. The physicians, ministers, and scholars rushed in every direction looking for a solution. Soon the news spread throughout the city that whoever could cure the king's obesity would receive a great reward. One day, a strange man arrived at the palace and claimed that he knew how to cure the king. Now, this is usually the point in old stories where things start getting interesting. The guards asked him, "And who exactly you are?" The man replied, "I am an astrologer. I study the stars." The guards looked at one another. "What do the stars have to do with the king's illness?" The astrologer smiled. "You will soon find out." The physicians thought the man was completely ridiculous. To be fair, they had a point. If someone told me he could cure obesity by studying the stars, I'd be a little suspicious too. But considering that their own lives were now in danger, they decided they had nothing to lose. So the astrologer was brought before the king. The king looked at him and said, "They tell me you possess a cure for my obesity." The astrologer bowed politely. "No, your majesty. I only possess knowledge of astrology." The king frowned. "Then why are you here?" The astrologer replied, "If your majesty permits, I would like to examine the stars tonight and discover the fate of your illness." The king stared at him in disbelief. "You fool! What good is knowing the fate of my illness?" The astrologer answered, "At the very least, your majesty will know whether your condition can be cured at all." The king was irritated by the man's boldness, but he was also curious. So he finally said, "Very well, return tomorrow with your answer. But if you waste my time with nonsense, I will have your head cut off." The astrologer smiled. "Don't worry, your majesty. The stars have many things to say. I'm certain you will be pleased to hear them." Now that, my friends, turned out to be a very optimistic prediction. The next day, the astrologer returned, but this time he seemed troubled. He approached the throne slowly and lowered his head. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "after studying the movement of the stars last night, I have reached a disturbing conclusion." The king leaned forward. "Well, speak." The astrologer took a deep breath. "According to the stars, Your Majesty has no more than 1 month left to live." I don't know what answer the king was expecting, but I'm fairly certain it wasn't that one. The royal court fell silent. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the king exploded with rage. "What?" He jumped to his feet. "You dare enter my palace and tell me that I'm about to die?" He immediately ordered the guards to execute the astrologer on the spot. The guards dragged the old man forward and placed the sword against his neck. But the astrologer calmly said, "Your Majesty, if I'm lying, then give me 1 month to prove it." The king thought for a moment. Then he shouted, "Throw him into prison. After 1 month, I will bring him back here so he can watch alive and healthy before I order his execution." The guards began dragging the astrologer away, but as he disappeared down the hallway, he turned and said with a faint smile, "Your Majesty, the stars never lie." Which is exactly the sort of thing you say when you're being dragged toward prison. From that day, the king changed completely. The fear of death consumed him. He lost all interest in food. The magnificent feast prepared for him every evening remained untouched. Days passed, then weeks, and slowly the king began losing weight. The more he feared death, the less he cared about food. By the 29th day, almost all of his excess weight had disappeared. Technically speaking, this may have been the most successful weight loss program in the kingdom. The king, who had once seemed enormous, now looked thin, pale, and exhausted. Finally, he ordered the astrologer to be brought before him. The old man entered the royal chamber in chains. The king looked at him and said, "Only 1 day remains. If I am still alive tomorrow, prepare yourself for death." But instead of trembling, the astrologer laughed, not mockingly, almost cheerfully. Then he said, "Your Majesty, you are no longer suffering from obesity. Was that not what you wanted?" The king frowned. "Yes, but what good is that if I am about to die?" The astrologer smiled. "My king, who am I to predict the lifespan of kings?" The chamber fell silent. The king stared at him. "What do you mean?" The astrologer bowed his head and replied, "When I arrived at the palace, I saw that your physicians had tried every medicine imaginable. Nothing had worked. So I decided to prescribe something different." The king narrowed his eyes. "What did you prescribe?" The astrologer smiled. "Fear." The king said nothing. The old man continued, "Your physicians gave you herbs, they gave you medicines, they gave you treatments, but I gave you something that finally changed your behavior." The king sat quietly. For the first time in many months, he had no answer. The astrologer looked at him kindly and said, "Sometimes medicine comes in strange forms, Your Majesty." Now, honestly, this old Persian story reminds me of another funny little tale. They say that once the king's soldiers were ordered to walk through the city, capturing and killing every donkey they could find. One terrified man suddenly rushed into a stranger house and begged for protection. The owner of the house looked at him in confusion and said, "My friend, they are killing donkeys. Why are you so afraid?" The frightened man replied, "Well, haven't you seen how serious they are about catching donkeys? I'm afraid they might mistake me for one and kill me too." صاحب خانه به گفتش خیر هست که همین لحظت تو را چون پیر دست. گفت بس جدند و گرمن در گرفت، گر خرم گیرند هم نبود شگفت. The owner of the house looked at him for a moment and then said, "Well, I don't know about the donkey part, but at least all that running gave you a bit of exercise." That's how these old stories go. Perhaps fear is not always a terrible thing. Sometimes it can be a kind of medicine. Thank you for listening to this old Persian story. This is Amin and this is the Iranian Storyteller. Take care of yourself